I've been doing a lot of research recently on what all of the popular camera brands are offering in their prosumer range of cameras in terms of video tools. And today I'm going to explain exactly why Lumix comes out on top every single time, especially if you do want to shoot video. For those who are wondering why I'm bald now, by the way, it's because I had a hair transplant, okay? So gonna have to get used to this for a little bit. This video won't necessarily be about resolution or codec, since that varies between camera to camera in every single brand, but more so about the video tools that are normally seen in higher end cinema cameras, but that have trickled down into consumer bodies. Here's a table that I've made with all of the video features listed on the left, along with each brand and whether they have it or not. I'll explain each feature in a little more detail, just in case you're not aware of what it does and how it can benefit your workflow. Starting off with OpenGate Video, and that's a feature that allows you to capture the entirety of the sensor instead of just the 16:9 area when you're using a 16:9 codec. So for those who aren't aware, a full frame sensor is actually 3:2. So when you are shooting in 16:9, you're effectively cropping out the top and the bottom of the sensor, so you're losing sensor height effectively. Whereas when you're shooting in OpenGate, you're capturing all of it, that full 3:2 area, and even though most people are delivering in 16:9 anyway, the benefit of shooting with that full 3:2 area is effectively cropping and reframing in post. And in today's world, where we're expected to deliver both vertical and horizontal versions for our clients, for web use and also socials, having that extra top and bottom real estate makes it much easier to get vertical crops out of the image, which means you don't have to shoot twice, and instead from one clip you can get both the horizontal and the vertical cut much easier. So it's extremely useful, and there's only a couple of brands that are offering it. So after trawling the spec sheets of all of these included brands, I've realized that Canon, Nikon and Sony don't offer any OpenGate features inside any of their cameras. And this also includes the Z8 and the Z9 for Nikon. I've seen on many forums that the Nikon users are begging for OpenGate to be added, but as far as I can tell, it's still not there. Fuji does have OpenGate on the X-H2S, the XM5 and the XS20, and of course Lumix has been offering OpenGate since the S1H, so basically every single full frame Lumix apart from the S5. So I rate that Fuji are offering OpenGate in relatively affordable camera bodies, but as it stands, Lumix are definitely charging ahead in this category. The next feature is shutter angle, and this effectively allows a user to bypass the maths involved when setting their shutter speed when shooting video. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys watching are used to or have heard of the 180-degree shutter rule, and that effectively is the rule that's applied to make sure you get natural motion blur when shooting video. So effectively what you do is you double your shutter speed depending on what your frame rate is. So let's say you're shooting 25 frames a second, then your shutter speed will be 1/50th of a second. If you're shooting in 50 frames, then it'll be 1/100th of a second, and so on. But effectively what shutter angle does is allow you to just set it to 180 degrees so that when you change your frame rate, you don't have to bother changing your shutter speed as well. And basically every single high-end cinema camera will utilize shutter angle instead of shutter speed, but not every single consumer camera offers this in their video function. So Lumix have had shutter angle in their cameras for as long as I've been shooting with Lumix, so from the S5 all the way up to their latest S1II series bodies. Looks like Canon also have shutter angle in the R5C, the C70, the C80 and the C400, but not in the R5II or the R6II, so again you are going to need one of the more video-centric bodies in order to get shutter angle. And Nikon also have shutter angle in the Z6 III, the Z8 and the Z9, and Sony have it in their FX series, but not the Alpha lineup, so the A7 series and so on. There's no Fuji camera that has shutter angle as far as I can tell. So yeah, it looks like all brands are doing shutter angle to an extent, but Lumix are doing it the most, so they win. False color is one of the most popular methods of exposing your image in the world of film, and for anyone that's never used false color before, effectively what it does is pull up a color overlay onto your image that accurately shows you how each part of the image is being exposed. So it's really useful for getting decent exposure on your skin tones, let's say if you want them to be sitting between 50 and 70 IRE, or for making sure that your highlights aren't being clipped and so on. Most external monitors will have a false color feature built in, but not many consumer bodies have false color internally. But there are a few brands that are offering it. So Lumix have recently introduced it in their S1II series cameras. So that is the S1II, the S1R2, and the S1II. And then there's a few Canon hybrid bodies that also have false color built in as well. But Fuji, Sony, and Nikon don't have false color in any of their bodies as far as I can tell. But there is a workaround if you are shooting with Sony cameras, and that's by effectively loading in a false color LUT into your camera and then using it like that. But since it's not technically built in out of the box, I can't really give them the win on this category. I don't really use false color that much, to be honest. Maybe on occasion, but it's not my preferred way to check my exposure. Instead, what I normally use are waveforms, and I'm sure if anyone's ever done any color correcting or color grading in post, you'll know what the waveform sort of thing looks like. Effectively, it's this line trace that shows you how each part of your image is exposed again. So let's say, for example, you're clipping your highlights and it will start to flatline at the top of the graph, and the same will happen if you're crushing your blacks at the bottom of the graph as well. It's great to see a few of these brands offering waveform as an exposure tool in camera. So Canon have waveforms in some of their more video-centric hybrid bodies, and Nikon also have waveforms in the Z6 III, the Z8, and the Z9. Sony don't currently offer waveforms in any of the FX series cameras aside from the FX6, so again, your price point for entry to get that feature is going to be around £5,500, and Fuji don't offer waveform in any of their cameras as far as I can tell. Lumix have had waveform in every single one of their cameras I've used, from the GH6 to the GH7, G9 II, and also the S5, all the way up to the later full frame cameras. So the next category is anamorphic desqueeze, and specifically the workflow when shooting anamorphic video. And again, Lumix have been charging ahead of the pack in this category for years now, because they've been offering anamorphic desqueeze options and anamorphic sterilization options in camera for as long as I've used their cameras. So you have options from 1.3 times all the way up to 2 times desqueeze in camera, so that you can effectively monitor your anamorphic footage when you're shooting. Now, apparently the R5C has anamorphic desqueeze, but they don't have 1.5 times. I think it's only 1.3 times, 1.8 times, and 2 times. And then also the C400 has anamorphic desqueeze options as well. But there's no anamorphic desqueeze in the R5II or the R6II. So again, they've limited what cameras actually have this function. Sony also have desqueeze options, but they only give you 1.3 times and 2 times. So that means that if you're shooting with a 1.5 times, 1.6 times, or 1.8 times squeeze lens, then you won't be able to effectively monitor that footage. Thankfully, every single camera brand in this comparison offers proxy recording internally, and this is a really useful feature for post-editing workflows where you may be working with satellite editors, or let's say, for example, you don't have the most powerful computer for editing. And effectively what a proxy file is a smaller version of the bigger file that you can edit with, and then therefore not bog down your computer too much, because again, you're not using the full resolution. And it's also really useful, like I said, if you're working in a more collaborative workflow where you may need to send that footage off to someone else to edit, for example, because trying to transfer those big heavy files back and forth all the time is both time consuming and just really not effective, to be honest. So therefore what you could do is send the editor the proxy files, and then when you get the edited timeline back, you could always just relink those bigger resolution files again. So all of the brands offer this, and that is a massive plus, because I do think that proxy recording is extremely useful in a professional video workflow. And while we're on the topic of workflow, only a handful of cameras offer ProRes internally, and ProRes is normally favored by a lot of production houses as their intermediate codec, because it's a really nice blend between quality files but small sizes. And it's also using the intra-frame compression, which means that it's a lot easier on most editing machines as well. So that's why it's preferred over other codec types like H.265 compression or HEVC, because sometimes they can bog down your computer quite a lot. So normally you might find that if you're working with production houses, they ask you to deliver your footage in ProRes to make it easier for them on their side. So being able to offer it again internally is a massive plus. Lumix have ProRes internal on the S5IIX, the S1II, the S1R2, and the S1II, and you get a few different sort of compression types in the sense that you have 422 and 422HQ, so you have a little bit of control as to, you know, how big your file size is going to be. Nikon also have ProRes internal on the Z6 III, the Z8, and the Z9, but I'm going to caveat that because they only have ProRes 422HQ, so you will be dealing with quite large file sizes. And Fuji also have ProRes internally on the XH2S and some of their GFX bodies, but to be honest, I don't think anyone's buying a GFX medium format camera to shoot video. Canon and Sony though, they don't have any ProRes internal options in camera. The last feature on this list is being able to record directly to an SSD. And surprisingly, Lumix is the only consumer camera brand that seems to be offering this feature. I know that Blackmagic can also do it, so any of the Blackmagic fans in the comments, please don't hate on me. And the reason why I haven't included them in this comparison is because they are effectively framing themselves as a cinema camera brand, and they're also technically not hybrid bodies, so that's why I've only included the brands in this video. But yeah, so from this list of brands, Lumix is the only one to offer direct to SSD recording. And for those who are wondering why this is a big deal, effectively it helps out massively in terms of workflow and also cost of storage, because CF Express cards are super expensive, whereas as we all know, SSDs are relatively affordable nowadays, and you can get 2TB SSDs for not much money at all. So if you need super fast write speeds for the heavier internal codecs, then SSDs will definitely be the cheapest way to achieve that. It's also a much faster workflow because you can just rip that SSD off your camera and plug it directly into your computer and start editing straight away, instead of if you were shooting with CF Express or SD cards, then effectively what you'd have to do, of course, is offload that footage onto a hard drive and then start editing from there. So it works twofold in that sense because it's cheaper and it's also a faster workflow, and I really do hope that more brands start utilizing this via their USB-C ports in the near future. So as you can see, every single one of these video features can be done with Lumix cameras, and pretty much with the entire range, bar of course the false color, which has only come recently in the latest S1II series cameras. And this is effectively why Lumix are leading the race when it comes to video production with the smaller hybrid bodies, because they just offer so many more features in terms of professional video workflow that you'd probably be used to seeing if you're using higher end cinema cameras. And even though I know Canon and Sony are very popular for the hybrid shooter when it comes to video shooting, they won't give you the same tools and features that Lumix cameras will. And if you do want those higher end features, then you're going to be spending a lot more money than you would be with Lumix. And that is ultimately why Lumix is definitely the best bang for buck for anyone that wants to do video but wants to do it properly. So yeah, that is essentially case in point why Lumix are the best in this category.